Hey, what's up everyone? It's Guys here. And Jeff Bezos was just exposed. In 2008, the entire world's economy was turned upside down after the housing market collapsed and people began losing their homes left and right. And even though Amazon wasn't immune to the financial fallout, Jeff Bezos decided to use this as an opportunity to do one thing: buy back stock. Now, when you hear that a company is buying back its own stock, it might not sound like a big deal, because they were simply buying back shares from the open market and returning them to shareholders. But in this case, it would be more accurate to say that he bought himself. You see, throughout 2008, while all of his competitors were collapsing and investors were scrambling for the hills, Jeff took the chance to buy 1.2 million shares of Amazon stock for a total of $164 million. And that move paid off handsomely because by 2019, those shares would have grown to over $700 million. But that's not where the story ends. After all, Amazon didn't just repurchase stock, they also cut prices, lowered expectations, and laid off thousands of employees. So how could the company afford such a huge share buyback program at a time when they were also lowering prices, laying off thousands of employees, and missing earnings estimates left and right? Well, here's what happened. When the 2008 crisis hit, consumer spending slowed dramatically. And for Amazon, this meant that they had a ton of excess inventory with nowhere to go. As a result, they did what any normal company would do and lowered prices to get rid of everything sitting in the warehouse. Of course, this isn't exactly a profitable endeavor, but it did serve to boost sales and gave the illusion that Amazon was doing quite well despite the crisis. In fact, this strategy worked so well that it boosted sales enough to pay for Amazon's massive share buyback. In other words, Jeff was essentially able to use customer money to buy back stock instead of profits. Of course, that's not the full picture because he also spent billions of dollars expanding Amazon Web Services, which ended up turning into the most profitable division within the entire company. But still, the fact that he used customer money to buy back stock doesn't really paint a good picture. That's why Jeff stopped Amazon's buyback program in 2009 when things got really bad, and he instead focused on retaining cash and cutting expenses. And if you were wondering why Jeff would ever want to spend $164 million of his own money on buying back stock, well, let me put it this way. He was able to double his money without adding a single dollar of value. Think about it. If Jeff went out and spent $164 million on a new project, he would have to make sure that that project either generated $164 million of revenue or provided him with some other tangible benefit. But with a share repurchase, he simply buys a portion of the company back from shareholders, and in exchange, those shareholders are one less person away from owning 100% of the company. This means that when Jeff buys back stock, his ownership stake increases without having to prove to anyone that he could run the business better. The problem with this is that over time, this gives Jeff an incentive to prioritize stock buybacks over investing back into the company. That's why since 2010, corporations have preferred to give back money to shareholders through buybacks and dividends rather than reinvest it back into the business. This has led to a lot of criticism because it incentivizes companies to prioritize short-term gains over long-term growth. After all, increasing revenue and growing a business is difficult and takes time, but buying back stock is very easy. All a company needs to do is make sure that they do and invest the money in anything too risky, and it lands almost always end up being a profitable move. In fact, since 2010, U.S. companies have spent $5 trillion on stock repurchases, which is 3 times more than what they spent on research and development. It's no wonder why corporations have been reluctant to spend money on innovation. But anyway, going back to 2008, we should also mention that Amazon did take advantage of the crisis in another way. When the housing market collapsed, real estate values fell across the board, and this included Amazon's headquarters in Seattle. As a matter of fact, Amazon's headquarters lost nearly half of its value during the crisis, which prompted Jeff to start negotiating with the landlord. At first, Jeff tried to lower his rent, but when that didn't work, he asked if he could sublease a portion of the office space and keep working there without paying any rent. And much to his surprise, his landlord agreed. However, this was only temporary because by 2013, Amazon's lease was set to expire, and they had to come up with a new plan. This time around, they decided to purchase the parking garage next door, tear it down, and replace it with a high-rise building. This allowed Amazon to triple their footprint to over 1 million square feet and retain control over their headquarters for another 10 years. Not to mention, their new building was much nicer. It cost a lot more money, but they didn't have to pay for it themselves. Instead, they convinced their landlord to cover all of the expenses and foot the entire bill. In exchange, Amazon promised to sign a 10-year lease and pay 40% more in rent. For the landlord, this was a no-brainer because now they re-guaranteed a new high-paying tenant and they don't have to worry about finding a new tenant every couple years. It's a win-win situation. Amazon gets a sweet new office building and the landlord gets a reliable tenant. But the real winner here is the guy who owns the building. You see, Jeff managed to convince his landlord to build him a $250 million headquarters for free. Of course, this isn't technically free because he is paying for it with higher rent. But for him, this was a much better deal than signing a new lease for 40% more rent at the same old building. In other words, he convinced someone else to pay for his new office building and he didn't have to lift a finger. Speaking of landlords, Amazon has also become a massive landlord themselves, owning 65 million square feet of office and warehouse space as of 2019. In fact, they've gotten so big that they re-renting space back to smaller businesses and startups at below-market rents. For example, they charge 50 cents per square foot for office space in New York City and 33 cents per square foot in San Francisco. That's significantly below market rates. Why would they do this? Well, it makes sense to think of Amazon as just a ruthless profit-hungry corporation, but that is not really true because even though they are one of the largest companies in the world, they're very much still in growth mode. And as a result, they're willing to lose money in the short term for long-term benefits. In this case, giving below-market rate discounts is a great way to attract customers. And all Amazon cares about is becoming the most customer-centric company in the world. So maybe Jeff Bezos isn't as evil as he seems. Speaking of evil, Walmart just profited from the pandemic while small businesses collapsed. Click here to learn more and I'll see you there.